Owning a lumber and firewood business wasn't exactly my childhood dream, but after 20 years of dealing with corporate nonsense, I decided it was time to carve out my own path, literally. So, I bought 10 acres of land on the outskirts of town, just far enough from the HOA-infested neighborhoods to breathe freely, and set up shop. My little slice of heaven came with towering pines, crisp air, and an endless supply of firewood orders from yuppies who thought a roaring fireplace made winter aesthetic. Business was good. My life was peaceful. Then the HOA came knocking. To be clear, my property isn't within their jurisdiction. I checked. Twice. The Hickory Hills Homeowners Association, because what's classier than naming a place after dead trees, had no authority over my land. That didn't stop them from trying. The first encounter came on a Thursday morning. I was in my workshop, sharpening a saw blade, when a knock rattled the front door. Wiping my hands on my jeans, I opened it to find a woman who could have been cast as the villain in a Lifetime movie. Platinum blonde bob, pearls strung tight around her neck, and a clipboard clutched like a weapon. Behind her, a lanky guy with a comb-over hovered nervously, clutching a manila folder. "Can I help you?" I asked, already sensing I didn't want to. The woman's lips puckered like she'd just tasted a lemon. "Mr. Carter, I'm Marcy Caldwell, president of the Hickory Hills HOA. This is my colleague, Brad Jenkins. We've received several complaints about your activities, and we're here to address them." I blinked. "Complaints? From who?" "That's confidential," she snapped, then glanced over my shoulder. "Is that a chainsaw I hear?" "Probably," I said. "You're standing on a lumber yard." Brad coughed into his hand. "Ms. Caldwell would like to discuss some regulations that apply to the neighborhood." "I'm not in the neighborhood," I interrupted. "I'm on private property." "Not your property. Not HOA property. Private. Get it?" Marcy's expression hardened. "Hickory Hills values its aesthetic integrity. We can't have industrial equipment disrupting the peace. You'll need to cease operations immediately." I laughed, which only made her angrier. "With all due respect, Marcy, you've got no authority here. I'm outside the HOA boundary. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do." I stepped back to close the door, but Marcy wedged her clipboard into the gap. "This isn't optional," she hissed. "Your activities are disturbing the community, and we will take action if you refuse to comply." "Take all the action you want," I said. "Just don't do it on my property." Then I shut the door, perhaps a bit harder than necessary. I figured that was the end of it. I figured wrong. A week later, I found a bright yellow notice tacked to my gate, "Cease and desist," written in bold letters across the top. Beneath it was a list of alleged infractions, including unauthorized forestry equipment and excessive noise. It was signed by Marcy Caldwell. "Are you kidding me?" I muttered, crumpling the paper in my fist. Marcy had left her phone number at the bottom, so I dialed it, fully prepared to give her a piece of my mind. She answered on the second ring, her voice syrupy sweet. "This is Marcy Caldwell, HOA president." "Marcy, it's Carter. I just got your notice, and I have to ask, are you trying to be funny?" Her tone iced over. "I assure you, Mr. Carter, this is no joke. If you fail to comply, further action will be taken." "Further action? You can't even take the first action." "I'm not part of your HO. The Hickory Hills HOA has a responsibility to maintain community standards," she said. "If you refuse to cooperate, we will explore all available avenues to resolve this matter." "Great," I said. "Let me know how that works out for you." Then I hung up. The escalation came fast and furious after that. Marcy's available avenues apparently included sending me a series of increasingly absurd letters. One claimed my chainsaws violated community noise ordinances. Ordinances that, I'd like to point out, do not apply to me. Another warned that my unesthetic wood piles could result in fines. The final straw was a letter accusing me of endangering neighborhood wildlife. That one came with a printed photo of a squirrel sitting near my log splitter, as if that proved something. "Unbelievable," I muttered, showing the letter to my friend Jake, a fellow woodworker who often helped me on big jobs. Jake squinted at the squirrel photo and snorted. Looks like your operations got a hostile witness. More like a hired spy, I said. What am I supposed to do? Issue the squirrel a hard hat? Jake laughed. I'd say you're dealing with a classic Karen situation. Maybe you should start documenting this stuff. That turned out to be excellent advice. 2 weeks later, I woke up to find my gate wide open and fresh tire tracks leading onto my property. Following the tracks, I discovered the aftermath. A stack of split logs overturned, a busted chainsaw that had been accidentally run over, and a freshly painted sign staked into the ground that read, "Cease operations now." That was the moment I realized Marcy Caldwell wasn't just an annoying busybody. She was dangerous. So I took Jake's advice. I installed security cameras, placed motion sensor lights around the property, and started keeping a log of every interaction with the HOA. If Marcy and her lackeys wanted a fight, I'd make sure I had the receipts. And sure enough, they came back. This time I'd be ready. The security cameras paid off faster than I expected. Less than a week after setting them up, I woke up to another mess. This time, someone had dumped a bucket of paint onto a stack of freshly cut lumber. Bright, neon orange paint. Subtlety clearly wasn't Marcy's strong suit. But here's the kicker. The camera facing the front gate caught the culprit in the act. It wasn't Marcy herself but Brad Jenkins, her comb-over accomplice. The footage showed him nervously looking over his shoulder before scurrying onto my property, paint bucket in hand. He managed to splash paint on his own shoes, which left a lovely trail of evidence right back to the gate. I called Jake over to take a look. "Is this enough to call the sheriff?" I asked. Jake grinned. "If it's not, I'll eat my hammer. Let's go ahead and see how Marcy and Brad feel about a little spotlight." Before taking legal action, I decided to try a different approach. Public embarrassment. I uploaded the security footage to a private neighborhood group online with a polite caption. "Hey neighbors, just a friendly reminder to respect each other's property." Unfortunately, someone decided to redecorate my lumber with orange paint. If anyone recognizes this person, please let them know this isn't how we do things around here. P.S. Check out those shoes. Classic mistake. Winky face. Within hours, the video had dozens of comments. Most were on my side, with neighbors expressing shock and disgust. A few suggested I report it immediately. But my favorite comment came from a neighbor who tagged Marcy directly. "At Marcy Caldwell, care to explain?" It was glorious. Marcy, of course, didn't respond, but the damage was done. Brad wouldn't be winning Citizen of the Year anytime soon. The next day, a certified letter arrived. It was from the HOA, demanding that I remove unauthorized surveillance equipment. I laughed out loud. "Unauthorized?" I muttered. "On my own property. Good luck with that." Jake, who was helping me fix the ruined lumber, shook his head. "She's doubling down. That means she's scared. You've got her cornered, man. Keep pushing." "Oh, I'm not letting this go," I said. "If she thinks she can intimidate me, she's got another thing coming." The following week, things escalated. I woke up to find my front gate padlocked shut with a chain and another sign stapled to the fence. "This property is in violation of HOA standards. No access permitted until compliance is met." Compliance? I was about to lose it. Thankfully, the cameras caught Brad again, this time with a bolt cutter in hand. He'd cut my lock, replaced it with his own, and then left with a smug little smile. I made sure to save that footage in 3 different places before calling the sheriff. Deputy Mitchell, a no-nonsense guy in his 40s, showed up within an hour. I showed him the footage, the damaged property, and the growing stack of HOA letters. He whistled low. "You've got yourself quite the situation here," he said. "Let me talk to this Brad fella. We'll see if he's ready to own up to what he's been doing." I leaned against the workbench. "And Marcy? She's the one pulling the strings. I'll be paying her a visit too," he said. "But you might want to start thinking about taking this higher. Civil court, restraining orders. Already on my list," I said. "But thanks for the suggestion." 2 days later, Deputy Mitchell called me back. "Brad admitted to everything," he said. "He's scared out of his mind. Claims he was just following orders." "Marcy," I said. "That's what he says." but proving it's another matter. She's not dumb enough to leave a paper trail. I smiled. Oh, she might be. She just doesn't know it yet. With Brad singing like a canary, I decided it was time to go on the offensive. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Lisa who specialized in property disputes. She'd dealt with HOAs before and knew how to hit them where it hurt. Lisa's first move was to draft a cease and desist letter of our own, demanding the HOA and Marcy specifically stop harassing me, trespassing on my property, and causing damage to my business. The letter also included a demand for reimbursement for the ruined lumber and broken equipment, totaling several $1,000s. When Marcy received the letter, she didn't respond directly. Instead, the HOA's lawyer sent a curt reply denying all wrongdoing and accusing me of defamation. Lisa just laughed. They're bluffing, she said. But that's good. It means they're feeling the heat. Meanwhile, my cameras kept rolling. It didn't take long for Marcy and her crew to slip up again. Late one night, I caught footage of two figures sneaking onto my property and broking my log splitter. One of them was unmistakably Marcy. The next morning, I handed the footage over to Lisa. Her eyes lit up. This is it, she said. We've got them dead to rights. It was time to take this battle to court. Walking into the courthouse with Lisa felt like stepping onto a battlefield. She was armed to the teeth with legal briefs, photos, and video evidence, while I carried a quiet determination to see this fight through. Marcy Caldwell and her lackeys had pushed too far for too long, and today was Judgment Day. The hearing room was small and sterile, with beige walls and creaky chairs that did little to set the mood for justice. Marcy arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by Brad and a bespectacled lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The moment she saw me, her lips curled into a forced smile that screamed, "I'm innocent." "Mr. Carter," she said sweetly as she approached. "I do hope we can resolve this misunderstanding amicably." I didn't even bother to fake a smile. "We'll see." The judge was a stern woman in her 60s with glasses perched on the tip of her nose. She wasted no time getting started, and neither did Lisa. My lawyer opened with a clear summary of the case, laying out the evidence like a seasoned prosecutor. "Your Honor, the defendants have repeatedly trespassed on my client's property, caused thousands of dollars in damages, and have attempted to enforce regulations that do not legally apply to his land. This is not merely harassment. It's a coordinated campaign to sabotage his business and livelihood." Marcy's lawyer tried to object, but the judge shut him down with a sharp look. Let her finish. When it was Marcy's turn, her lawyer leaned heavily on the good neighbor narrative. "The HOA was simply trying to maintain community standards," he said. "Any actions taken were in the interest of preserving property values and ensuring harmony among residents." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "By slashing tires and dumping paint? Interesting definition of harmony." The judge's glasses slid a fraction lower. "Stick to the facts, counselor." The highlight of the day came when we played the security footage. First, Brad sneaking onto my property with the paint bucket. Then the padlocking stunt. And finally, the cherry on top, Marcy herself broking my log splitters under the cover of night. As the videos played, Marcy's smug expression crumbled. Brad looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. By the time the last clip ended, the courtroom was silent except for the judge's pen scratching against her notes. Lisa turned to Marcy. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you deny that it's you in this video?" Marcy's lawyer jumped up. "Objection." Leading the witness, the judge waved him off. "Overruled." "Answer the question, Mrs. Caldwell." Marcy cleared her throat, stalling. I'm not sure. It's very dark in that video." Lisa didn't miss a beat. "Shall we compare the outfit to the one you're wearing in the footage?" She held up a still frame showing Marcy in her signature pearl necklace and blazer combo. "It's quite distinctive." Marcy's lawyer muttered something under his breath, probably a prayer. After hours of testimony, including a hilariously awkward cross-examination of Brad, who folded like a wet paper bag, the judge finally called for a recess. When we reconvened, her ruling was swift and decisive. The evidence presented leaves no doubt that the defendants acted in bad faith and with deliberate intent to harm the plaintiff's property and business. I am granting a permanent injunction against the HOA and ordering Mrs. Caldwell and Mr. Jenkins to pay restitution for damages totaling $15,000. Marcy's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. Additionally, the judge continued, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges related to trespassing and vandalism. Court is adjourned. Walking out of that courtroom felt like chopping down the tallest, most stubborn tree on my property. Victory was sweet, but the fight had taken its toll. Marcy avoided eye contact as she scurried past me, clutching her purse like it was a life raft. Brad trailed behind her, looking utterly defeated. Lisa clapped me on the back. That went about as well as it could have. You held your ground. Thanks to you, I said. Drinks are on me tonight. Back home. I wasted no time taking down the ridiculous cease operations sign still hanging on my gate. I replaced it with a new one I'd had custom made. Private property. No trespassing. HOAs will be prosecuted. Jake came by that evening, bringing a six-pack to celebrate. As we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the pines, he raised his bottle. To stubbornness and sawdust, he said. And to Marcy finally shutting up, I added, clinking my bottle against his. It was a hard-fought battle, but I'd won. My business was safe, my property was mine, and the HOA wouldn't dare cross my fence line again. And if they did, well, I still had plenty of security footage to go around. A month after the courtroom showdown, life had mostly returned to normal. My lumber business was thriving again, orders pouring in faster than I could split the wood. Neighbors who'd once kept their distance were now dropping by to say how much they admired my persistence, and how glad they were that Marcy had been put in her place. One even ordered a custom dining table made from my timber as a show of solidarity. But the story wasn't quite over yet. You see, Marcy Caldwell wasn't the type to take a loss lying down. It started with rumors. I heard Marcy's been telling people you faked the security footage, Jake said one afternoon while we were reassembling the log splitter. Apparently, you've got some kind of Hollywood studio hidden in the woods. I laughed. Let her spin her little yarns. Everyone saw her in that footage. Besides, if I had Hollywood-level tech, do you think I'd be making firewood? Jake grinned. Fair point. Still, don't underestimate her. She's got that special kind of crazy. He wasn't wrong. A week later, I found flyers tucked under my gate and stapled to telephone poles around the neighborhood. They were plastered with bold red letters. Protect our community. Say no to illegal businesses disrupting our peace. Below it was a grainy photo of me hauling lumber, taken from an angle that made it look like I was committing some sort of felony instead of, working. Wow, I muttered, crumpling the flyer. She's really leaning into this villain arc. Lisa, ever the professional, advised me to let it go. She's grasping at straws, she said. As long as she stays off your property, it's not worth engaging. But Marcy didn't stay off my property. The cameras caught her again one night, skulking along the edge of my fence line with a flashlight. This time, though, she wasn't alone. She had a man with her, someone I didn't recognize. They didn't break in, but the way they were pointing and whispering set my teeth on edge. I decided to pay a visit to Deputy Mitchell the next morning. She's not trespassing technically, he said, frowning at the footage. But it's clear she's up to something. I'll have a word with her. That word must have been more of a tongue lashing because Marcy's antics cooled off after that. No more flyers, no more midnight stakeouts. For a moment, it seemed like she'd finally accepted defeat. Or so I thought. One crisp morning, I was stacking a delivery of logs when a black SUV rolled up to my gate. Out stepped a man in a suit so sharp it could have sliced a 2x4. He introduced himself as Richard Grayson, an investigator from the state's environmental agency. We've received complaints about potential violations on your property, he said, flipping open a leather portfolio. I'd like to take a look around, if you don't mind. I crossed my arms. Do you have a warrant? He hesitated. No, but cooperation is appreciated in these matters. Sure, I said. Just let me grab my lawyer. She'll appreciate cooperating, too. Grayson's polite demeanor faltered. That won't be necessary. We'll be in touch. He left without stepping foot past my gate, but the message was clear. Marcy was pulling out all the stops. I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor anymore. I was dealing with someone willing to weaponize the system. Lisa sprang into action, filing a formal complaint against Marcy and the HOA for harassment. Meanwhile, I started reaching out to neighbors who'd been victims of her antics in the past. It didn't take long to find others who'd been targeted with bogus fines and petty grievances. One neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, told me Marcy once tried to fine her for hanging a birdhouse that wasn't HOA approved. Another revealed she'd been required to repaint her front door twice in 1 year because Marcy didn't like the shade of blue. "Why didn't you fight back?" I asked. Mrs. Hargrove shrugged. "Most of us don't have the time or money for a fight. It's easier to give in." "Not anymore," I said. "It's time someone put her in her place for good." The final blow came not from me, but from the state. Turns out, filing baseless environmental complaints is frowned upon. Grayson returned a few weeks later, this time to investigate Marcy herself. Someone, and I'm not saying it was me, had tipped them off about a certain HOA president dumping yard waste in a protected wetlands area behind her house. When the fines came rolling in, Marcy's reign of terror finally crumbled. She stepped down as HOA president, citing personal reasons, and Brad quietly moved out of the neighborhood altogether. The new HOA leadership sent me a letter apologizing for the previous administration's actions and assured me they'd stay out of my business from now on. As for me, I'm still running my lumber yard, still stacking firewood, and still living my best life. The new sign on my gate says it all. Welcome, unless you're the HO. Jake thinks I should turn the whole saga into a documentary. Maybe I will someday. For now, though, I'm just enjoying the sound of chainsaws humming and the sweet, sweet silence from across the fence line.